Hello, everyone. I think that we're just waiting on Amir to begin.
Hey there. Has anyone heard whether Amir is joining us or not?
I haven't heard. I just know that he confirmed that this meeting was happening.
Yeah, I saw that. I just tried texting him to see whether he's got some technical glitch or not because he's off and away.
Well, hello there. How are you guys doing?
Hey there.
Good to see everyone. Apologies for the late start. I had to do some reinstallation, get my audio back on Zoom. But so thank you for joining for the September meeting of Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee of ANC 1C. My name is Amir Irani. I'm chair of the committee, and I also represent 1C01, the southwest corner of Adams Morgan. Commissioner Guthrie, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Ted Guthrie, 1C03.
Commissioner Jackson.
Chris Jackson, ANC 108.
Very good, thank you. So we have one thing on the agenda tonight, and that's to discuss the Slow Streets Initiative. There have been some issues, some complaints I've seen in the neighborhood about the effectiveness of the Slow Streets Initiative and traffic in general in Adams Morgan. What we've seen is cars, or the complaints that I've seen are that cars are speeding along at very high speeds, and that these cars aren't necessarily, they don't have local destinations. The purpose of the Slow Streets Initiative was to make space for residents to physically distance themselves and to lower, and that it accomplishes that by lowering the speeds and making certain streets in Adams Morgan local traffic only, which means that the destination, the ultimate destination, must be within 2 blocks of that street. With that, I will open up the floor to, first commissioners, if there are comments or additions to be made. And hearing none. Commissioner Guthrie, please.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's going to be helpful for us to get some input from the community, particularly people who have been out using streets that have been designated as slow streets. But I think that before we can sort of finalize what we're going to do as an ANC, we really need to get someone to speak authoritatively on behalf of DDOT about both the purpose behind this, how it fits into the overall picture, what it is that both motorists and non-motorists should be able to expect on such streets, what DDOT is willing to do to help that happen, and just in general, be informed enough of what DDOT thinks it's doing to be able to criticize them or their failure to act in such a way that affects their actual purpose of the program. So I'd really like to make sure that we get an appropriate DDOT representative here, at least for the full ANC meeting, if we're going to be considering some sort of resolution on this in October. And if we can't get them then, to have them to this committee during the October committee meeting and get a resolution out in November.
Yeah. That was well said. And this community discussion hopefully will begin to shed light on some of those issues. And there have been some emails back and forth with members of the community and amongst commissioners themselves. And we are in the process of getting somebody from DDOT to attend one of our ANC meetings, either October or November. The Ward 1 representative from DDOT has, as of 5 days ago, unexpectedly left DDOT. So there isn't a Ward 1 representative from DDOT to attend our meeting. So there's a little bit of challenge. That's a challenge to get somebody from DDOT, but our MOCR, Mr. Anthony Moore, is working on getting somebody from DDOT. And he understands the issues that we are going to be speaking about. So thank you for articulating that and providing a little bit more context, Ted. So I will take, looks like Japer, Commissioner Bowles, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm not a member of this committee, but I do have a lot of vested interest. I know that there's a few people that are on the video who are on the Reed Cook part of the neighborhood who will be trying to move forward with a traffic study. Essentially, folks on the side of the neighborhood would really like to have some street calming measures put into place. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I have been talking about this for quite some time, and I don't know if they will move forward without our support or would like to encourage our support, but they want something done, and especially now with the streets paving, it is crazy over here. And within the entire part of Reed Cook neighborhood, there's not a single street calming, traffic calming mechanism. Zero. None. There's no bulb outs. There's no street, there's no traffic bumps. There's no lifted intersections. There's nothing like that. And directly to the north, directly to the south, directly to the east, directly to the west, there are those things. So yeah, I would like to have the thought from this committee that, and support from this committee on whatever Reed Cook decides to do, that hope that we would be able to support them in getting some traffic calming measures. So.
Okay. Yeah, I did see an email from a resident on Champlain, and you and I have spoken about this, Commissioner Bowles, so thank you. So Nick Roland from RTNA, go right ahead.
Yeah. So actually, we need ANC support to go forward with a traffic study. It's required in the forms. So we would definitely really appreciate ANC support to go through with this traffic calming study. Essentially, DDOT will come out, look at these streets that we've identified as being kind of out of control. Yes, with speeding, but also at certain intersections where people aren't stopping at all either. So we've got a lot of dangerous intersections for pedestrians. So hopefully we can get your support on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This isn't, everyone on this ANC is in favor of some traffic calming measures in the neighborhood. Commissioners Guthrie and myself have spent time knocking on doors and getting petition signatures, getting a few hundred petition signatures, and we did it rain and shine, and have submitted that exact assessment, that questionnaire that you're talking about, to DDOT. I think the goal of this is it's not about whether there's our support. We want DDOT to be more engaged in this process because we've been down this path before. So we want what we're doing to be more effective. And as far as the slow streets go, there are a handful of them around Ward 1, and there's 19th Street in Adams Morgan that is a slow street. And the reason why the agenda item calls for other traffic calming in ANC 1C, Nick and Japer and everyone else on the call, is because we've heard from you guys and other residents specifically calling for measures in other streets in Adams Morgan. So I want to make sure that we we address those and not just the slow street that we have. Does that help, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. I was just saying that the form like literally says you need ANC support. So that's why I just mentioned that we need your support on that end. I don't know if it's via resolution or just like you have our, like what you just said, that you definitely support this measure. So that's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can do both, and we'll sign the form. And I think there's a spot for the ANC commissioner, but to sign, the ANC commissioner for that SMD to sign. But yeah, so thanks for articulating that, Nick. So it would be helpful if we could get a list of streets. I know Champlain was mentioned, but another, I know that we had passed a resolution about streets where we would like some traffic calming previously. I think Lanier Place was on there. I'm not sure if Champlain was on there, but Champlain should be on there. What other areas in the neighborhood would the neighborhood like to see traffic calming measures on?
If you want to open it up, there's quite a few people on the call, but things that we talked about in the RCNA meeting was Kalorama and Champlain. That intersection seems to needs another crosswalk, and people just don't see the stop sign there. We talked about speeding on 17th, Ontario. All those freshly paved roads are just getting people flying down them. Crescent Place, B Street, Euclid. There were like a lot of the intersection of Euclid and Champlain.
Was there a resolution that came out of RCNA?
Yes, RCNA approved the traffic study, and Fiona and myself have been working on identifying the streets and filling out the forms for each individual street and intersection, which obviously takes quite a bit of time, but we have those filled out that we could send over to you if that would help.
That would be very helpful. If you guys have already taken the time to do that, that'd be good. And we can add that to the draft resolution that we have, or we're throwing around amongst the commissioners. So thanks. Anybody that has a question, I see that there's a few people on the call. Please go ahead. Feel free to raise your hand by pressing *9 if you're dialing in, or just raise your hand. Zach, go right ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Zack Gold. Many of you know that I'm running to represent SMD 1CO5 on the northeast corner of the neighborhood. I'm glad that you mentioned Lanier as a traffic calming location. As a resident of the neighborhood and someone who bikes around the neighborhood, I'm glad that RCNA has noted the conflicts at the intersection of Kalorama and Champlain. Because I often bicycle up Champlain, and I basically have to wave my hands and ring my bell and do anything I can to make sure that cars turning left down Champlain notice me, even though they're supposed to have a stop sign. I think one of the things that's really important to me in this discussion, first of all, DDOT should really be surveying the households that are located on their slow streets, right? They know who lives there because they put them in. And I appreciated a neighbor on Nextdoor bringing attention to this issue of how drivers were acting on Biltmore. For me, the important thing that I think about is the cut-through streets, right? Our neighborhood has a lot of local roads, and I want people to be able to reach their homes and get from their homes safely, both by vehicle and also just walking around their neighborhood safely. And it's a concern to me, the vehicles that try to beat traffic at Harvard and Columbia and 16th Street, which of course is a intersection that this ANC has already tried to address. But in an effort to beat that light, I often see drivers quickly turning down Quarry Road and flying down Lanier and up Argonne. And that sort of cut through traffic, especially at high speeds, is just really dangerous. And obviously we saw how tragically that can play out in Mount Pleasant yesterday. So thank you for covering this issue.
Of course. Thanks, Zach, for your continued engagement. Looking forward to working with you more regularly on the ANC. Those are important issues. So right now, what I'd like to get is the streets that would benefit from traffic calming and the particular intersections where there are conflicts. It'd be good to have a list of those. Not, Nick, maybe you could go down the list of each of those things that you guys have already documented, and then anybody else on the phone can then chime in.
Yeah. So of the ones we documented, like I said, Colorama and Champlain, also the intersection of Ontario and Colorama, the intersection of Colorama and 17th, and then the corresponding the streets themselves, Ontario, Champlain, 17th, and then the intersections on the other side of 17th and Euclid, Ontario and Euclid, Champlain and Euclid. And then further down in the neighborhood, also 17th and V Street, Crescent and Beekman, and Ontario and Columbia was mentioned by the Jubilee seniors as always being blocked, always someone parking in the bike lane. Yeah, those are some of the streets that we've selected thus far that people speed down, or the intersections are dangerous where like it's either a large intersection or the intersection's on a diagonal, so that way it's hard for people to see like the crosswalk as they come to a stop. As far as Crescent and Beekman, there's no center dividing line over there. Beekman's supposed to be like two-way traffic. And on 17th and V, obviously we have a lot of people speeding down that street, but also a lot of like illegally parked cars that block the crosswalks. So in addition to like speed humps, we think would be great. Also like bulb outs at the intersections, just kind of ways to make the intersections more visible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe removing parking just to better increase visibility.
Yeah, definitely. And on Colorama, it's just so tight with parking on both sides. It's just a very tight road to get two-way traffic and cars down, or two-way traffic and parking, sorry.
Right. I wonder what the criteria is to have a street designated as a slow street. But there has been discussion about adding Quarry Road and Lanier Place to that list. Are there other streets that could potentially be a slow street?
I'd love to see that on Colorama, just because of all the pedestrian traffic going to Harris Teeter. A lot of people cut through Colorama to go to the grocery store. I think that's a great one. Also, Euclid's a very big cut through from the park into Adams Morgan. I think those are two very big, mainly traffic pedestrian streets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Colorama and Euclid. J.I.?
So Gordon in the chat kind of answered already, but I was going to say that the major requirements for slow streets is basically it has to be a small neighborhood street. If it's a two-way, it's the sort they're looking for streets that are narrow and low traffic enough that they don't even bother to put a double yellow on the street. So from my experience, Lanier, Quarry, and Colorama would certainly qualify. I don't know if they would do Euclid because it's one way, except for that one block.
Mm-hmm.
Though I have certainly had experiences of people tearing down Euclid. And actually, the other day, I was biking on Euclid on that one westbound block, and I had a driver thankfully wait for me, but basically he seemed to be waiting for me to turn down Champlain so that he could floor it to head east towards 16th. On the other hand, the way that they are implementing these safe streets, especially for something as narrow as Euclid, would essentially involve them putting a sign in front of the parking lane. And so I frankly am not convinced that they would be able to have any meaningful effect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing on something like S Street across DuPont where, you know, they can put the sign in the middle of the street and kind of make drivers go around it. But for Euclid, you know, I don't think that that would be really possible for them.
Yeah. Okay. Those are, that's helpful.
I would certainly be willing to, you know, I would certainly suggest throwing it in as one of the suggestions and let them make that decision, I guess. I just wouldn't want anyone to get their hopes up on that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks, J.I. Devin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. I have like a general comment and also a suggestion for Champlain here. First of all, I think that I think we're all sort of in the agreement that, like, you know, these streets can be dangerous, but like we can't really like enforce our way out of it. Like we can't, you know, there are frequently MPD cars around, but I don't think that the police can like ticket and arrest enough people to really make these streets safe. That doesn't necessarily make me feel safe, and I think that other neighbors might agree. So I think that changing the street designs is really the thing that ultimately will help make this safe. And I'm really encouraged that everyone's doing this work to get towards that. My quick suggestion on Champlain would be to have a crosswalk that's also like a neck down, where only one car can pass at a time. You know, I have the privilege of sitting, you know, living here on Champlain and like looking out on the street from my office window here. And cars come through very quickly with great regularity, especially after the repaving in the neighborhood. And although this Champlain itself wasn't repaved, that's fine. But yeah, Champlain is a relatively straight street with kind of a dog leg, and cars come through very quickly. And if there were a narrowing where only one car could pass at a time, I think it would dramatically slow cars down and be like a natural like design feature that would make the street safer. I have an example that I found from New York City that kind of illustrates what I hope would be helpful. And I'm proposing that this happen right at the gap in these apartment buildings on Champlain, almost where the street turns. According to Google Maps, it's 2346 Champlain Street, 2346. And you know, a lot of people cross there to go through that gap to get over to 18th Street on foot, and it could be a good spot to have both you know, kind of do a couple of things at once, like make it safer to cross the street for pedestrians and also slow down cars at that spot as well.
Would you mind emailing?
Yeah.
You know what you found there?
Yeah, I will.
It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and fine. If anyone has questions on that, I'm happy to answer. But my one last comment on traffic in the neighborhood is I think it'd be really helpful to have some pickup drop-off zones around here. I noticed that, you know, a lot of honking and problems are caused by cars double parking, FedEx trucks double parking. to do deliveries to buildings around here. And it'd be great if there was some pickup drop-off zones with some spacing around here that cars and delivery trucks could pull into to make short deliveries. You know, on one hand, those double parked cars do like slow traffic down, which is good, but also there can be like honking and just congestion. So that could be another better use of the street space, to have some dedicated space to do deliveries like that.
Yeah, yeah. So just pick up drop off zones as a general concept, right? You don't have a particular spot you're thinking about?
Probably about every apartment building could have one, and maybe like there could be like one or two on most blocks. But I don't know exactly. I don't know specifics. Yeah, Nick suggesting.
Yeah, conceptually, yeah. Pick up drop off zones are a good idea, and we've there are quite a few new ones implemented in and around. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, and please do send me that email or send us that email. Commissioner Guthrie, please.
Yeah, as we're talking about streets that should be involved in the slow street program, my concept is that, with the exception of Calvert, 18th, Columbia, that little bit of Adams Mill, 16th, Connecticut, and Florida Avenue and U Street, all of our streets should be slow streets. They're all basically undersized for service of the immediate neighbors and neighborhood. And what I'd like to hear from DDOT about is what the point of designating certain streets as slow streets is, compared with all of the other streets that we have that really have similar needs, but aren't being included in this. And what the big picture is that they're trying to fix, because my sense is that a lot of drivers haven't picked up on what the rules for a slow street are, regardless of what they put in place. They're driving around the barricades and then pedal to the metal. And part of the function of DDOT has to be education, as well as putting in barriers to frustrate people who would exceed the speed limit. But unlike a lot of neighborhoods, we have very few streets that should be used for through traffic. They just don't go through anywhere. And if they're not through streets, they should, it seems to me, have a similar approach. And I was interested when Nick went through the list. It sounded like nearly everything over in Reed Cook should be included. Well, I have a hard time understanding how that's true, and it's not true over on this side of the neighborhood.
And part of what we're thinking about with the slow streets is how to measure their efficacy. Are they doing what they were intended to do? Are they really slowing down traffic? Are they really restricting it to local traffic only? And I've seen those barriers move multiple times a day even. And it's helpful I thought when the barriers were first put out, I thought it was a great idea. I was happy to see it done. Happy to see more local streets, local traffic only streets in our neighborhood. And so I completely agree with the sentiment of having more slow streets and more traffic calming measures. But we also need to have metrics to understand, is it working? And putting those barriers in. Some of the discussion I've read is making it so that the barriers are in the middle of the road, so that when a driver approaches, you can't just swing around it so easily, and you have to, a driver has to read it and see it and carefully go around it, and kind of also yield to any oncoming traffic. Now, sometimes I see those barriers pushed off to a parking lane behind a parked car or in front of a parked car, and that's not helpful. So I think any resolution we do should also address that and maybe have DPW move those barriers, since DPW is in our neighborhoods anyhow, enforcing parking. So as they go around, that they get out of the car and just drag that barrier to the right spot would be a nice thing. So coming along to Fiona.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to second what Ted said. I agree with you, Ted. I think the reason the Reed Cook neighborhood got together and we did list almost every street in our neighborhood for traffic calming measures. And I think that someone was mentioning education. I think that starting with speed limit signs, there are very few in the neighborhood. And now that the general speed limit in DC is 20 miles an hour, I think that could be helpful, certainly for education. But also getting to your point about every street needing slow streets. I mean, I would love it if many of the streets in the neighborhood went down to 15 miles an hour. People come into the neighborhood, at least on the Reed Cook side, from 16th Street. And whether it's because 16th Street is a faster street, or maybe they're frustrated about the about how slow 16th Street and crowded 16th Street can be. But you see it all the time when people turn onto Kalorama and then all of a sudden they're flying down Kalorama because it's a wide open street and it's easy to get down. And that Kalorama could definitely use some traffic calming measures. And then to reiterate what Nick was saying about crosswalks, there are many intersections, certainly in the Reed Cook side of the neighborhood, where crosswalks are not marked and are not marked well. That would also be very helpful for pedestrian safety. The crosswalks that I'm specifically talking about are Kalorama and Champlain on the north side of the intersection of Kalorama and Champlain, but the north side of Kalorama, not the south side of Kalorama that is marked. And then I think a crosswalk at Crescent and 17th up near the Meridian International Center would be helpful. It's a huge intersection in the sense of that it's in the middle of the neighborhood, but it's very large and trucks come by there all the time and delivery people come by there all the time and other people cutting through the neighborhood go through there. And it's very easy to drive very quickly, but it is in the middle of the Meridian Hill side of Reed Cook, and lots and lots of pedestrians in that area. So, thank you.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks for your work with RCNA to get that information together. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the larger group, I know I mentioned this privately, that in other neighborhoods there are active citizens, in many cases ANC commissioners, who are in a way monitoring their barriers to make sure that they're in a place that create traffic, that create slower traffic. I don't think that's sustainable, and I'm not going to suggest that the commissioners and the SMDs who have these signs should be going out every day, and so, but that's sort of shows the lack of thorough implementation across the district. That really it's up to local concerned citizens to be putting the barriers in place, and not as you suggested, have DPW or some city official who's moving through anyway make sure that they're where they're supposed to be. I think it's also important that we determine where they are supposed to be. There's the DDOT actually painted on the ground the placement of where they want the barrier to be. Again, it's important that that barrier is supposed to be placed somewhere that it is in fact a barrier, to make people who shouldn't be riding on that road think twice, and to make those who are going to be driving on that road to have to slow down to go around. So again, there needs to be some way that DDOT and other agencies are making sure that it is implemented properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen those. I don't know how many of those markings are still visible, but I have seen those on the road and have had to move barriers because they get pushed off to the side, especially as like, I'm sure some people go around, some drivers, frustrated drivers, or someone who's frustrated goes around and pushes them off. But when some of the roads are paved, I've seen the barriers just pushed off altogether off the road. And you do notice, or at least in the beginning, I noticed that it was painted and it wasn't in the middle of the road, but it was off, blocking one travel lane. So not two travel lanes, not in the middle, but blocking off one travel lane. So
I think that's an appropriate place because the driver approaching the travel is in that travel lane, so they'll see the sign right in front of them. And if they are a resident on that street or going to visit someone on that street, they'll, go around the barrier. But they are directly confronted with the barrier that says you should or should not be here.
Yep. Fiona?
Yes, all I wanted to say was, yes, I was on Biltmore the other day, and the slow street sign had been pushed off to the side, so it served no purpose. So again, getting to several points mentioned about who's responsible for them, how do they get maintained. I have seen them pushed off to the side or even just flipped so that they don't create any kind of information or barrier at all. And so that's not necessarily helpful.
Yeah. I think it'll be helpful to, I don't think that DDOT will commit to maintaining the placement, but a creative solution could be DPW. But maybe I'll be proven wrong with the DDOT thing, but I know that in the past, they haven't gone to, or they've been so short-staffed that they can't maintain some of the things they put out, but DPW could be helpful there. So I've taken quite a few notes here about the streets, and we've gotten some very good comments. And Devin, I'll be looking forward to that email so we can take a look at your idea there. And Nick and Fiona, if you could also share that assessment, that will be helpful for us as we start to craft our ask of DDOT and hopefully have somebody engaged at our coming meeting. So other comments from commissioners, members of the community before we wrap this up? All right.
Oh, sorry. Am I on? I just really quickly, I wasn't sure. We were talking about, I felt like we talked a lot about pedestrian safety and slowing cars down. Will we get to the point where we're talking about bicycle safety, or would that be like the next phase? We're not talking about that right now.
I've heard a lot about bicycle safety in our current discussion. I haven't been excluding that.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just, I think that that definitely could be in the DDOT conversation. So yes, maybe I didn't pick up all those points. Sorry, thank you.
I don't know. Okay. So yeah, there's a few good ideas going around, and what we might do is break it up into 2 resolutions, but I think this has been very helpful to get some of these thoughts out there and a lot of these places. So please do follow up with your commissioner over email. Please feel free to send me an email. And hearing no other comments, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Commissioner Guthrie. Is that a second, or you have a comment?
Just waiting. Farewell.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.